What is up? What is up? What is up, everybody? Welcome to another Flat Earth Wednesday. That's right, it is Flat Earth Wednesday. What is up, everybody? And I'm sure you guys got to look at the thumbnail already, so I need not really get into that. Make sure you guys hit that thumbs up over on Rumble, hit that like button over on YouTube, hit that share button on both platforms, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed yet. But tonight we're talking Flat Earth Wednesday, Beyond the Curve, because we talk about, the basic flat earth arguments all the time, right? Which always involve, the failure of the globers to prove curvature and the flat earthers proving that there is no curvature and, water sticking to a spinning ball. And, we touch on that stuff from time to time in almost every Flat Earth Wednesday show. But I also like to go what I call beyond the curve, where we talk about we discuss other elements of the flat earth movement and the flat earth theory and the flat earth globe earth debate that most flat earth globe earth debates do not include or incorporate, because there's so many layers to the deception that there's an infinite amount of content you can come up with, when it comes to this flat earth theory, because it's like the more it's the classic, the more you know, the more you don't know, the more you learn, the more you want to learn. And the more I've learned is the more I realize just how blatant these people lie. It's not just, it's like this. They make up stuff and then they publish it in these scientific magazines and these scientific articles and whatnot, and they just tack the word science and NASA and the trigger words onto it to give it some semblance of credibility, name some university and some professor, and to make it sound like it could possibly be legitimate. But then when you actually read these articles and you compare the notes in both articles, what you find is a lot of times there's contradictions. Like, for example, one article says, Earth's days are getting longer because the Earth's spin is slowing down or speeding up, or, whatever claim they want to make. And then there's other articles that say, well, we don't feel the Earth spinning because it's spinning at a constant speed. It can't be constant if it's accelerating or slowing down. You see what I'm saying? And the reason why they lie like this is because in most cases, when it comes to the flat earth, globe earth debate, it tends to be like a cut and dry thing in most people's minds, where they just think, you know what? The experts say earth is a ball, and that's it. And anybody that thinks differently is stupid or something's wrong with them, or, something of the sort. So it seems like the flat earth argument is completely nonsensical. And that's because when you go to mainstream sources, and even from what we learned in school ourselves, they've never went farther than telling us that the old ancient primitive peoples from the past believed earth is flat, but we're much smarter now and we know earth is round. That's literally their introduction to every, earth science teaching that you've learned since elementary school. But as flat earthers, many of us began to ask the question, because there's some flat earthers that don't even touch on the ancient cosmology. But as us flat earthers, we like to investigate into that claim that primitive people believe the earth was flat, because then you go investigate those people and see what, try to learn as much as you can about what those people knew and understood and try to convey to future generations. And you start to realize that these so-called primitive people were not as primitive as we thought they were. In fact, they were a lot smarter than many of us are. And it seems that concept seems to have bear more weight, because if you look at the trends of intelligence amongst the masses in previous decades leading up to the present time, what you'll find is people have been getting exponentially, dumber and dumber. IQs have been getting collectively lower. And that's not to say we're all stupid now or anything like that, but on average, the average human being has reduced his intelligence. And that's mostly, I should say, because of the advent of convenient technology, is what I call it. Because there's technology, like, using a shovel instead of using your hand. And then there's convenient technology, like driving instead of walking. You know what I'm saying? Or microwaves instead of making a fire. And because of this convenient technology, people have become less reliant on their own skills in their own hands. And now we've gotten not only dumber, but weaker at the same time. And when you go back and you investigate that claim of the so-called primitive people believing the earth was flat, you start to realize, okay, I've already investigated all the modern day scientific claims of flat earth. Now let me go back and look at what these not so primitive people believed about the cosmology. And what you'll find is, well, they were right. And we are being lied to. And all it takes is for somebody to take a peek behind the curtain and everything's revealed. Literally, most of us started out being globe earthers, or we all started out being globe earthers like everybody else. But at some point, we came across the notion that the earth could possibly be flat. And most of us set out on a path to prove that flat earth was nonsense. And we became flat earthers because you can't disprove it. No matter how much you try and how hard you try, you can't disprove it. To this day, NASA still has not been able to justify the fact that there is no real photographs of Earth. They just keep putting out these fake CGI images, which they admit are CGI, and continue to tell us, hey, these are the pictures of Earth. And people continue to accept it because most people don't research into how NASA produces these photographs, because if they did, what's up, Q-Trax? Because if they did, they would realize that NASA even admitted that these images are doctored and photoshopped. But most people don't even care to look that far. And I don't know if you guys caught that stream that Tommy Sotomayor did on Rumble with Bro Sanchez and me. And it was supposed to be a continuation of the show he did on Bro Sanchez's show, where they were, having a discussion and people were coming up and stating their issues with him and whatnot, and addressing claims and asking them questions and all that stuff. And we ended up doing a show on Tommy's channel. And I basically sparked the conversation because a lot of people in the chat were asking if Tommy was a flat earther when he was on Bro Sanchez's show. But I don't think he saw the comments or ever was able to get around to answering that question. So when we went on his show, I asked him the question, and it started an entire flat earth conversation. We went on for about 2.5 hours on it. And one of the brothers on the show, Brother Brian, Relationship Rehab over on YouTube, he made a very interesting point. And he said, if the government were to come out and admit right now that Earth is flat and they've been faking space, but came up with some other excuse as to why they needed all that money that they say they put into NASA, he said a lot of people are so comfortable in their ignorance that they would accept it because they don't want to imagine that they've been lied to on that scale. You know what I'm saying? And he also gave a couple examples of, like, people who have mental breakdowns and do crazy stuff when they find out their spouse is cheating on them, when they finally learn the truth. And the point he was making was, not everybody is ready to accept the truth. And it made me think about it. And I was like, I've changed my approach with the flat earth discussions so many times before. Maybe I've reached another crossroad where I realized even this method isn't as effective as I thought it would be. Although it was more effective than the last, I found even more effective method. And that is, don't even bother debating with the globe earthers because they don't want to know the truth. So no matter how much truth you give them, they're going to ignore it and continue in their ignorance because, well, ignorance is bliss. And so I figured, the best thing to do is to just, instead of trying to engage these people in debates, just answer their questions as best as I can and try to reach the people who, are reachable. Talk to the ones who will listen. And, I know most of you guys in here are flat earthers already. So that kind of creates a bit of an echo chamber where we're not really reaching too many people on the outside and bringing them into the fold. But what we are doing, though, is we're sharpening our knowledge. I'm helping to sharpen your knowledge on flat earth and giving you an entire holistic approach to flat earth. So that way, depending on your audience in real life, you can have the conversation from so many different angles and still prove your point. Because a lot of times when people try to discuss flat earth who genuinely believe in flat earth but aren't as knowledgeable, these globe earthers, when they ask them questions that they can't answer, what happens is that reinforces the globe lie in the mind of the glober, and it eliminates the chance or the ability of that flat earther to actually get through to them. You see what I'm saying? So you got to be knowledgeable, because a lot of times flat earthers win debates with globe earthers simply because the debate turns into the flat earther actually teaching the glober about their own ideology. And it doesn't really make for an effective argument, and you can't really sway too many people to your side if you yourself don't fully understand your side and your position. So that's all I try to do with the Flat Earth Wednesdays, and that's why we don't focus too much on the actual scientific arguments. I've done several streams talking about that. This is where we go into the psychology of it, the methods of deception, the contradictions, and that type, the history and that type of stuff. So that was kind of the inspiration for this thumbnail. A fact is information minus emotion. An opinion is information plus experience. Ignorance is an opinion lacking information. Like, I believe Earth is a ball, but I don't know anything about flat Earth, so how can I possibly challenge it? Oh, shit. Shout out to my man Leonard for the PayPal. Shout out to LTO and my brother Lee 14224 on the Cash App. Appreciate you, brothers. And stupidity is an opinion that ignores a fact. And that's literally, like, even on the political side of things, the conservatives, when we try to talk to these liberals that hate Donald Trump and give them the facts, they literally start to act stupid and give their opinions completely disregarding the facts. Like when they claim Trump is racist, I believe Trump is a racist. And then we say, well, Trump's done this for black people. He funded the HBCUs throughout his professional career before he became president. In his public career, he was doing all sorts of shit for black folks that went unnoticed and wasn't really recognized because he didn't do it for the clout. He didn't do it for show. He did it out of the kindness of his heart. And that makes for a pretty bad racist, if you ask me. So they would ignore the facts and hold on to their opinions. And it's literally the same thing when it comes to the flat earth, globe earth argument. Just like with some liberals, you realize there ain't no change in their mind. They're going to die stupid. It's the same thing with the globe earth. There ain't no change in their mind. They're going to die stupid. And that's just the sad reality of it. But as flat earthers, if we're going to teach this stuff to our children, we need to know what we're teaching them, and they need to know how the deception works, because kids are very social. And when they go to school and they learn something new and they go to school, they'll be excited to share that information. But then they're going to get bombarded with questions. What up, D. Allen? But then they're going to get bombarded with questions, and they have to be able to answer those questions. So this is where my shows come in, and people and teachers like me come in, where I can equip you with the knowledge and the understanding so that you can pass that understanding on, because that's what it's about. We're not going to wake up this generation of adults. All the adults that are alive today that understand that the globe is a lie and know that the earth is flat, that's it. There ain't going to be too many more that are going to wake up to it and be willing to admit it to themselves. But the kids are the ones we need to teach this to, and the kids are the ones that need to learn this, because if you really think about it, the enemy propaganda, a lot of it is aimed at kids, because they understand that these kids, hell, when they taught us about the globe, we were kids, and look what it did to so many of us. So imagine if we can actually teach the truth to our kids, and instead of having a generation being raised in ignorance like we were, because many of us didn't start learning the things that were really affecting our lives until we were like in our late 20s and 30s. You know, if we can wake the kids up and have them not grow up in ignorance like we did, I think it'll make for a much better world, a much brighter future, because we're going to have sharper minds in the leadership positions in our society. Because if you look around right now, we got a lot of dumbasses, and they're doing a lot of dumb shit, and it's ruining life for everyone. And we're going to get into some of that as well. But before we get started, before we get too far into my introductory discussion, make sure you guys go subscribe to the Citizen Man channel, the Citizen Man Backup channel over on YouTube. In case they zap me over here on Citizen Man TV, you'll be able to find me on the Citizen Man channel on YouTube. You'll also find me on Rumble, because they don't do the censoring on Rumble. So a lot of my streams that aren't available on YouTube are available on Rumble in their entirety. And any streams, any future streams that get removed from YouTube will be available on Rumble. All right. So make sure you check out those past replays over on Rumble. And anybody watching this replay, you can also find it on Rumble if you lose me on YouTube. The Lost Book of Herbal Remedies. Get yourself a copy of The Lost Book of Herbal Remedies. Get back to nature and natural healing. I'm going to leave that up for a second, because I got to put the matter of fact, I'm just going to go ahead and roll through it, because I got to put the links in the chat. And get yourself a copy of the Metabolic Cookbook for the weight loss recipes, and the Anabolic Cookbook for the muscle building recipes. All three books are linked in the description box of every video. Also linked in the description box, scrolling tags that are scrolling across the screen in the banner below, and the links that I'm about to pin in the YouTube chat. Those are the donation links. So if you'd like to send some support and help support the broadcast, you could do so by sending in a kind donation via Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo. And if you give me 30 seconds, I'll drop those links in the chat and pin them to the top right now. And I want to give a shout out to my brother Lee 14224. I want to give a shout out to my brother LTO. Says, brother Lee says, have a great Flat Earth Wednesday. My brother LTO says, Viva la Tierra Plana. And shout out to my brother Frank. Oh shit, Frank, my brother Frank just hit the PayPal, and my brother Leonard just hit the PayPal. Appreciate you guys. I'm gonna have to check the email to get you guys' comments from the PayPal. So give me a few seconds here, and let me get these links up. Oh shit. And then I'll jump to the email and see if you guys left any comments for me that I need to read off, because I don't like when people support me and I miss their comments. You know, I feel like it's being rude. I don't want to be rude. All right, no comment there. And shout out to Frank. He says product. Appreciate you, Frank. All right, I think that's it so far. So let's get on with it, shall we? Let me get my camera on for you guys. I know you guys like when I cam up. Get this camera going. There we go. All right. So, talking about the stupidity and the idiots at the helm, the people behind the idiots are actually evil geniuses, but the people pulling the strings and making the decisions are what we call useful idiots, right? And this is your climate change, the how to fool the public into thinking they're causing climate change starter pack. 5G towers, cloud seeding technology, HARP, chemtrailing, all that stuff. And Tennessee just actually passed a bill called the Chemtrail Bill, which bans chemtrailing over the state. And I think that's pretty cool because the governor of every state doesn't necessarily have control of the airspace over that state, but he has control over landing zones. But I'm not sure how they'll be able to enforce that legislation. Hopefully they'll find a way. But the reason why I'm showing you this is because believing in pseudoscience leads to real consequences. Look at what they're doing in these liberal states like California with all their emissions and their gas taxes, and now they're trying to tax by the mile and the pushing of the electric vehicles and all that shit in the name of stopping climate change. Food prices going up because farmers are being limited in their productivity and their production capabilities because in the name of climate change. So we're seeing real effects from this pseudoscience. And the fools that believe in this pseudoscience of climate change are not only also suffering the effects of the government tyranny that's being instituted in the name of fighting this pseudoscientific claim of man-made climate change, but they're also advocating for more government control because that's what it's all about. You manufacture a problem, and then you pretend to be fearmonger about the problem, and then you pretend to be the saviors, and the people will welcome more government control. And that's literally what they're doing. Like in those liberal states where you see them, in those liberal cities, where you see these district attorneys letting criminals off the hook. You know why they're doing that? Because they want to put the public under pressure. And when they put the public under pressure, the public is going to demand more cameras, more police powers. Which amounts to what? More government. And this is why I believe that teaching about the flat earth is so important, because the more people we can actually wake up to this lie, this globe lie, is the less people will have believing in pseudoscience. Because I can guarantee you 100% of the people who believe in climate change believe in the globe. Because if they could believe the experts on this bullshit in the face of all the information we know about weather manipulation, of course they're going to fall for the globe hoax. But the people who are questioning the globe are also questioning climate change. This is why they lump us all into one category called science deniers. But we're not denying science. We're questioning their religion of scientism is what we're doing. And they don't like that. They don't like that shit at all. So let's continue on. Have days on Earth always been 24 hours? This is from June 16th. Earth's day used to be 5 hours shorter, and it's predicted to continue lengthening over time. You know what that means? That means that when flat earthers ask the question, why don't we feel the earth spinning? And their answer is because the spin is constant, just like if you're in a vehicle, that's moving at a constant speed, you won't feel like you're moving. This debunks that claim that the Earth's rotation is constant. And they don't even realize it. You can go pull up one of these scientific articles right now about why don't we feel the spin of the Earth, and their explanation is constant speed. And then here we have livescience.com telling us that Earth's rotation speed is not constant. So which one is it? And I think we've gone over articles similar to this before. Once every 24 hours, Earth completes one rotation on its axis, making 1 day on our planet. This reliable rotational period is what allowed humans to develop systems to tell time and what signals to humans, animals, and plants when it's time to rest. But Earth's rotation hasn't always been so consistent. In fact, a long, long time ago, Earth's day was much shorter, said Sarah Milholland, an assistant professor of an assistant professor of physics at MIT. The Earth has experienced the day that days that were both shorter and longer than it is now at different points in history, Milholland told Live Science in an email. Most importantly, it was affected by tidal interactions with the moon. And again, this is based on the assumption that the moon controls the tides. In the flat earth theory, we don't believe that. So this is assumption on assumption. About 1 billion years ago, the length of days was only about 19 hours. Now, how would they even know this? Were they there? No, they weren't. Again, assumption based on assumption based on assumption. But because she's an MIT assistant professor, well, she's allowed to make those assumptions, and we have to accept it. Early in the planet's history, Earth's rotation may have even been shorter than 10 hours. Konstantin Batygin, a professor of planetary science at Caltech, told Live Science in an email. This speedy rotation was the result of a huge moon-forming impact with a Mars-sized protoplanet that accelerated Earth's angular momentum while breaking off enough of the planet's surface from the moon. The moon's tidal effects eventually worked on the Earth to slow it back down, Batygin said. So this is one person making this claim of all these crazy things happening in space. And again, were they there? This is no different. This is no different than the Big Bang. Nobody was there, so how would they know? But again, because they're important people that have prestigious positions, people believe this crap. Earth's day has even been longer than 24 hours, Milholland said, although only by a few milliseconds as a result of subtle changes to the planet's molten core, oceans, or atmosphere. So first the days were shorter, then the days were longer. So that means Earth was speeding up and slowing down. It's always a long, long time ago or milliseconds. These are units of measurement that cannot accurately be quantified or justified. Because if you can't experience a couple milliseconds longer day, how are you going to know the day was longer? And if you weren't there 1 billion years ago, how do you know what happened 1 billion years ago? It's all based on assumption. But the fact of the matter is, the Earth is not rotating. It's the sun moving above us in a circle, in a spiral. It spirals towards the center in the summer months, and then it spirals out towards the circumference in the winter months here in the United States. From here in the United States, that's our perspective. But let's continue on. Earth's rotation is actually evidence of its planetary origin story, Milholland said. How quickly a planet rotates is determined by how it was formed when dust, rocks, and gas that circled the sun in a protoplanetary disk came together in space. Exactly how forcefully these pieces collide helps determine the planetary body's angular momentum, or how quickly it spins. You can think about it like spinning a bottle. The more force you apply, the quicker the bottle will rotate. And again, this is all based on assumption. And if you choose to believe this, you have to accept that this is a belief. If Earth had formed closer to the sun, our planet's rotation would look very different, she said. In this case, Earth might have become tidally locked to the sun, similar to how the moon is tidally locked to the Earth, Milholland said. If Earth were closer to the sun, it would experience stronger tidal interactions from the sun that would make the rotation period the same as the orbital period, meaning that a day could last a year, she explained. Many exoplanets are thought to be tidally locked because they are very close to their host stars. Milholland said, these planets have a permanent day side and night side because only one side of the planet is facing the star at all times. Earth's day is still changing, so that means the speed still isn't constant. While the length of Earth's day might seem consistent to us, Badigan and Milholland said, it's actually still changing. In particular, it's lengthening, albeit very slowly, about 1.7 milliseconds every century. That is a very, 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 very small measurement. 1.7 milliseconds. And the thing about it is, how do they even detect this? But again, they're the experts, they're the smart people, so maybe they have an explanation for it if one were to ask. The change in Earth's spin rate is happening gradually enough that evolutionary processes can adapt to the changes over time. Badigan said, the relative change in orbital speed would not be noticeable in daily life. Damn it, whoever's yawning, stop yawning. It's not noticeable in daily life. So if it's not noticeable in daily life, I guess now that puts us in the realm of belief, because now we have to depend on them and their intricate, high quality technology that none of us can really afford to take these measurements and give us these answers. So again, we have to believe them. Several factors are contributing to Earth's slowing rotation. The primary culprit is our planet's relationship with the moon, Badigan said. Tidal forces from the moon, the same kind that tug on ocean shorelines, are creating a friction effect as the moon slowly distances itself from Earth over time. Distances itself from the Earth over time, or from Earth over time. Indeed, that process will be extremely slow. It could take 200 million years for Earth's day to reach 25 hours. And you see, they can tell these lies because they know none of us are going to be around in 200 million years to prove them wrong. This is why it's so easy for them to lie, because of these big numbers, small numbers, very, very long lengths of time. In the meantime, other planetary and astronomical events could affect the length of Earth's day, Milholland said. For example, more commonplace events such as earthquakes could also have other smaller effects on its rotation. And what's funny is I just read an article a few weeks ago about Earth's core slowing down and spinning the other way, they claimed. I don't know how the hell they even know what's down there to even make that claim, but nevertheless, unexpected collisions with asteroids could also change the length of the day. For example, by applying torque in the direction of Earth's rotation to make it spin faster, Milholland said. For instance, the magnitude 8.9 earthquake that struck Japan on March 11, 2011, accelerated Earth's spin, which shortened the length of the 24-hour day by 1.8 microseconds. So small we can't detect it. So again, we have to depend on them and their equipment to tell us this. Human-made disasters are another possible factor. Climate change. You see, there goes your globe earthers pushing the climate change because they know their globe believers believe them, so they're going to believe in climate change. Climate change could also play a role due to redistribution of Earth's mass due to glacial melting, sea level changes, and tectonic activity, Milholland said. As the polar ice caps melt, which they're not because every winter they expand and then every summer they melt a little bit, the rotation is slowing down. So Earth's rotation is allegedly slowing down, but then when you ask them why don't you feel this movement, they say its spin is constant. And here, as they simultaneously claim it's slowing down, as the other article claims it's constant, they're saying the slowing is happening by milliseconds. So they're contradicting each other, but with such a small window that it could appear as if Earth actually is spinning constantly, but it's not spinning at all, is the whole point. Now, proof that the Earth isn't spinning at all is their claims of the Coriolis effect. Who's heard of the Coriolis effect? The Coriolis effect is the effect of Earth's rotation on flying objects, such as bullets. Let me see. And the Coriolis effect is said to be taken into consideration when snipers fire bullets. And they also claim that pilots don't have to account for Coriolis effect when they fly planes. So again, which one is it? How can the Coriolis effect affect a bullet traveling at 1,000 miles an hour, but it won't affect a plane traveling at half the speed or a quarter or a third of that speed? How? How is this possible? Because they're lying. And if the Coriolis effect is real, which means Earth's rotation affects a flying object, that means that the flat earthers claim that if Earth was spinning, a helicopter could hover and the ground would spin underneath it, and they could hover for as long as they need to hover and wait for the city they plan on landing in to appear beneath them without accelerating or thrusting forward. But they say, no, the atmosphere is moving with the earth and blah, 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 blah. So even when you're in a plane, you're moving with the atmosphere and it's all moving together. So if it's all moving together, how can there even be a Coriolis effect? You see what I'm saying? You see how they contradict themselves? But this is from StackExchange.com. Coriolis force on bullet versus airplane. And we'll take a look at what these folks had to say. Why do airplanes experience negligible Coriolis force while bullets experience the Coriolis force in long-range shooting, even though the mass of airplane is much bigger than a bullet? That's a good question. You may be interested in this physics.se post where it is claimed that the Coriolis force is not negligible on an airplane. Thank you. By negligible, I meant considerable deviation in flight path and not time, which is seen in bullet but not in airplanes. It's also worth pointing out that an airplane is not a projectile, so corrections can be made in flight to compensate for any number of things. So if the Coriolis effect throws a bullet off target left or right, then the Coriolis effect should also throw a plane off target, which is traveling slower to the left or the right, which means the pilots would constantly have to be correcting in one direction. But they don't. Just like if they're flying across a ball going forward, they would have to constantly be correcting downward in order to maintain their altitude and not get too high in the sky, because if they're flying in a straight line over a ball, eventually that ball is going to curve downwards, which is going to increase the plane's altitude, which essentially would cause the plane to shoot out into outer space if it could go that far. And thus, in order to avoid that, the pilots have to nudge the nose of the airplane down when they fly long distances around the ball. But again, pilots don't have to do that. They actually fly based on the assumption that they're on a flat, non-rotating Earth. Bullets don't experience Coriolis effect. The observer experiences Coriolis effect. I mean, the bullet goes straight, but the observer perceives it as curving. There is no force acting on the bullet other than gravity and the to be expected aerodynamics. And it's not even gravity pulling the bullet down. It's the density of the bullet through the air. Just to make things simple, suppose you are standing at the North Pole and you shoot a bullet south at some speed, aiming for a target 1 kilometer away. In the time it takes the bullet to get there, the target has moved east a certain distance because the target travels in a complete circle around the North Pole in 24 hours. From the viewpoint of the shooter who is turning with the Earth, it looks like the target is standing still, but the bullet has curved. But that's just a perception. Now, suppose you ride a train on tracks fixed to the Earth from the North Pole to the target. In the process, you will pick up the eastward speed, and you will experience that as an acceleration towards the east. That's Coriolis. But there is no Coriolis. That's the thing. Now, suppose you are in an airplane making the same journey. Let's assume there is no wind. That the air is fixed to the Earth the same way the train tracks were. Well, the plane travels through the air, so the plane travels south. The air will carry it to the east, giving it that eastward velocity, Coriolis. velocity, Coriolis again, or it could just be the wind. The acceleration felt is just proportional to the southward speed of the train or airplane. Why do airplanes experience negligible Coriolis force while bullets experience the Coriolis force in long-range shooting? You are confusing the force with the consequence of the force. Consider a powered parafoil whose total mass is mere 100 kilograms. The motor, parafoil, and pilot, and is moving at a mere 25 kilometers an hour, and a 50 caliber bullet whose mass is 50 grams and is moving at a hefty 3,125 kilometers per hour. Both at the same latitude and both heading in the same direction. The Coriolis force on the powered parafoil is 16 times that on the 50 caliber bullet. But yet you don't feel it when you fly, but they claim bullets, you experience this when you shoot bullets. That's ass backwards. Because the bullet moves faster. So whatever's acting on the bullet left or right will have less of an effect because the bullet is closing the distance between its origination point, which is the barrel of the gun, and the target at a much higher speed. Thus, the rotation of the earth wouldn't even have enough time to affect it. But if they say that the rotation of the earth does affect it traveling that fast, then why doesn't it affect an airplane? An airplane should feel more Coriolis effect than the bullet if that's the case, but they don't. On the other hand, the consequence of this force, the Coriolis acceleration, is much greater on the bullet than on the powered parafoil. No, now mass doesn't come into play. It's just the ratio of the two objects' speeds, which is a factor of 125 in favor of the bullet. And that, again, makes no sense because if the bullet is traveling faster, remember, the Earth is rotating at a constant 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. So if the bullet is traveling faster than the airplane, then the airplane should have more ground underneath it move than the bullet should. So how do the planes not feel it, but the bullets do? And their claim is because pilots correct for that, but they don't. This is where the term autopilot comes from. Airplanes always maneuver with respect to the surrounding air. Something which confuses beginner pilots is the following question. Imagine you have a wind from north to south and you point your airplane to the west. Where is the air pressure higher? The left side of the plane. A, the left side of the plane. B, the right side of the plane. The answer is neither. The pressure is the same on both sides because the motion of the airplane is best described in a frame where the air is stationary. The pilot can only detect there is a wind by noting that the trajectory of the plane is veering south. So first they said it's the Coriolis effect that makes planes do that. Now they're saying wind makes the plane do that. So the answer is yes, Coriolis forces do affect airplanes, at least as far as winds are affected by the Coriolis forces. So they're saying the Coriolis effect does affect the planes, but it only affects the planes if it affects the wind. So in other words, they're saying you could take the Coriolis effect out of that equation and say the wind is what's affecting the plane's trajectory. You see how they double talk? Whether or not Coriolis forces on the plane are important depends on how long the journey is. See here, for example. It is true, however, that a pilot doesn't have to know anything about the Coriolis effect in order to get to their destination, assuming they're not particularly short on fuel. A plane is subject to course deviations all the time, most of which are much more important than the Coriolis effect, and a pilot can simply correct for them by pointing the nose in the right direction. So now they're admitting that it doesn't have to be the Coriolis effect. More important than the Coriolis effect. A pilot doesn't have to know anything about the Coriolis effect because it ain't real. That's why they say its effect is negligible, because it's undetectable and it ain't real. And they're outright lying about the bullet. Planes and bullets are both affected by Coriolis effects. The bullet will be more affected than the plane because its velocity is higher, but that's only the tiniest part of the story. And you see, it should be less affected because its velocity is higher, because it's got less airtime than an airplane. That's an ass backwards statement. But again, because it's coming from the experts, people are going to believe it. Bullets are unguided projectiles. They go where the physics say they go. Any effect due to Coriolis are unabated. Also, bullets which are fired at a distance where Coriolis really start to matter are also trying to hit a very small target. Small effects are very noticeable. Planes are controlled. There is a guidance system, such as a pilot, which is trying to keep it on course. This is important because there are forces that will deflect the plane off course, which are orders of magnitude more powerful than the Coriolis effect. If there was not active correction, those other forces would virtually guarantee that we never arrived at our destination. Because there's a guidance system in play, we rapidly trim the aircraft to counteract the Coriolis effect as a side effect of trying to trim the aircraft for all of the much bigger forces at play. There may be a slight deflection of the rudder associated with the Coriolis effect, but you would be hard-pressed to identify it amidst all the other forces. So they're saying the Coriolis effect is there, you just can't feel it because you'll feel the wind more than anything else. So why are we even making the claim that the Coriolis effect exists when it has no effect, when its effect is minimal? If it exists at all, that is. A lot of what people don't understand is the airplane is going to be affected more by gravity than a bullet. The airplane doesn't have to correct the nose of the plane because of the physics of the craft, along with the Earth's gravity pulling it downward. So the plane is basically orbiting the Earth, and that is why the Earth doesn't fall away from the tip of the plane with Coriolis effect when the plane is heading east. The plane's physics, along with gravity, keep the entire plane level, essentially. Keeping the aircraft airborne and also keeping the nose at the same level as the tail of the craft in perspective of the pilot. So if the plane is heading, irrespective of the pilot. So it's saying gravity. So now they're trying to cover up for the fact that pilots have admitted that they don't have to tip the nose of the airplane down as they're flying. Now they're saying it's gravity that does that. So they couldn't justify their original claim that, planes fly straight and flat across the ball because the whole atmosphere is moving with the ball. Now they're saying it's the atmosphere is not only carrying the plane with the rotation of the ball, but it's also keeping the plane leveled over the surface of the ball, while simultaneously, again, claiming that there's such a thing as the Coriolis effect. So the plane is heading east. So if the plane is heading east, the ground will not fall away from the plane. The tip of the plane is pulled downward already because of physics. A bullet, however, isn't affected as much by the same force. The plane is experiencing, resulting in an elevated hit on the target if facing east and a lower hit on the target if facing west because of the raising of the target or the drop of the target and not the drop rise of the bullet. So now they're saying that it's the target that moves because of Earth's rotation, not the bullet. When the bullet is the thing being fired out of the gun and the target is what's set up to be stationary. And not to mention, the shooter is shooting from the same ground that's moving with the target. So by the logic of the plane moving with the Earth because of gravity, shouldn't the bullet do the same thing because of gravity? You see what I'm saying? You see how their story don't really make that much sense when you really get to thinking about it? Well, let's continue. The acceleration due to gravity and due to fictitious effects such as the centrifugal and Coriolis effects are independent of mass. In addition, looking at airplanes as orbiting the Earth is a very incorrect way of looking at things. Also, the bullets traveling from the energy of the explosion and the plane is constantly releasing energy. the plane is constantly releasing energy to project forward. So completely different things, not really comparable. Is it bullshit? Says, do snipers really have to account for the Coriolis force? I have read very often that in long distances, snipers need to account for it. But frankly speaking, those long distances are up to what, 3 to 4 kilometers. It doesn't feel like Coriolis would have such a major effect on the path of the bullet for that comparatively small distance. The other thought is that since the velocity of the bullet is quite high, it might have an effect after all. Does someone have a better insight into this topic? And you notice they said 3 to 4 kilometers is a comparatively small distance. But on the last page, they just got done telling us that even at 1 kilometer, you could see the effect of the Coriolis effect. Again, contradicting themselves. So basically, if you're shooting at something that's small and far away, and there's basically zero wind, then it might be worth factoring that into your calculations. But mind you, there's never a time when there's zero wind. FYI, 3.5 kilometers is the longest range kill recorded. Most sniper rifles are considered effective out to 800 meters or so. Eventually, you would have to adjust for Coriolis, but you'd be adjusting for your heartbeats long before that. So they keep saying eventually you have to adjust for Coriolis. Then Coriolis has a minimal effect. The Coriolis effect is not zero everywhere, but it is at the equator, they claim. And they claim the Coriolis effect is zero at the equator because, logically speaking, if there was such a thing as the Coriolis effect, the Earth spins at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. And that 1,000 miles an hour spin is rather fast. So why don't we see the Coriolis effect at the equator? We should probably see it the most down there. The Coriolis effect is the apparent deflection of moving objects caused by the Earth's rotation. It's caused by the ground moving at a different speed than an object in the air. In the northern hemisphere, objects tend to curve to the right, and in the southern hemisphere, they tend to curve to the left. The Coriolis effect is strongest at the poles and doesn't affect objects moving east or west at the equator. Sorry, I just dropped my charger. But the thing about it is, if the Coriolis effect is real, if you're moving west, or let's say you're shooting west at the equator, then your bullet should hit the target faster. It should take less travel time for the bullet to hit that target than if you were to fire east in the same direction of the Earth's spin. And I highly doubt anyone has ever done that experiment. There is no example. There is no Coriolis effect. That's what I typed into Google, and this is what it says. For example, if a cannon were fired north from the equator, the projectile would land east of its intended path because it was moving faster eastward than its target. The Coriolis effect is also noticeable in large-scale air and water currents over long periods of time. And in fact, if the Earth is rotating from west to east, if a projectile was fired north, that means it should actually land west of the target of the intended path and not east. But I guess they say east because the Coriolis effect carries the object with it, apparently. I don't know. I'm not sure what the claim is anymore, because I thought the Coriolis effect actually made the projectile veer in the opposite direction because the Earth is spinning underneath it. So that object is going to be going in the opposite direction of the Earth's spin. if you're firing east to west. But if you're firing north and the earth is spinning east to west, then your round should land west of the target, not east. Limitations. The Coriolis effect is imperceptible for everyday objects. Oh, so you can't see it, you can't experience it, you can't experiment with it, but believe us, it's real. That's basically what they're saying. Because Earth rotates once per sidereal day. It's also difficult to demonstrate the Coriolis effect by hand because it's hard to match the velocities of a turntable and pen closely enough. The Coriolis force is zero at the equator. Though the Coriolis force is useful in mathematical equations, there is actually no physical force involved. Instead, it's just the ground moving at a different speed than the object in the air. Why do we not feel the Coriolis effect? Remember, they claim that this thing is real and snipers use it and all that. Turns out they don't. The Earth completes one rotation for each sidereal day. So far, motions of everyday objects. For motions of everyday objects, the Coriolis force is imperceptible. Its effects become noticeable only for motions occurring over large distances and long periods of time, such as a large-scale movement of air in the atmosphere or water in the ocean or wherever. So now it has to be long distances. But they just said firing a bullet at 1,000 miles an hour at a target 1 kilometer away, you'll experience the Coriolis effect. Now they're saying you can't experience the Coriolis effect because it's imperceptible unless you're traveling for a long distance, which presumably would have to be longer than 1 kilometer. Do land surveyors also prove Earth is flat? And this is funny. Do surveyors take into account the curvature of the Earth? Yes, when it's appropriate to do so. But Jeranism and Mark Sargent, and as much as I don't trust Mark Sargent, he's done good flat Earth work because he's had surveyors call into his internet show and explain that land surveyors don't take the Earth curvature into account unless they're dealing with a property that's over 600 square miles. Or is it 6 square miles? I can't remember what it was, but it was some ridiculous number that no construction project would ever need. Some ridiculous area of land that no construction project would ever need. It's crazy. Surveyors work with different models of the Earth, but these models have limits to how big an area they can cover before you see differences between the model and reality. This is termed a systematic error. The globe is a systematic error. So for a lot of smaller tasks, you can assume that the Earth is flat. Make sure you work in a certain way to avoid exceeding the job specifications with these systematic errors, and things will work out. For other tasks, you can assume that Earth is spherical, or you can assume that it's ellipsoidal, or you can assume that it's geodal. Or you can assume that the surface is all that matters. Which you choose depends upon the nature of the job and the job specifications. Part of a surveyor's education is about these different models and which should be used in different circumstances. An understanding of errors in general and systematic errors in particular is also an important part of a surveyor's education. And here's the Wikipedia. Survey works up to 100 square miles are treated as plain. Survey works up to 100 square miles are treated as plain, and beyond that are treated as geodetic. So survey works up to 100 square miles. That's a large area. And it's still treated as a plane. So anything above 100 square miles, now they have to treat it as a spherical Earth. But if the ball Earth is real, you wouldn't have to treat it as a plane because you would know how everything works on the ball Earth. Now, aside from the outright lies that they tell, they also publish a lot of fantastical space junkie stories like this one, right? Voyager 1 back in action after NASA fixes 15 glitches billion miles away. Fixes glitches 15 billion miles away. So this Voyager 1 satellite was having some sort of malfunctions, and NASA was able to magically tap into its computer system and fix whatever was wrong with it. But there's only one thing wrong with this story. 15 billion miles. So that means you could send a signal 15 billion miles away. And if you look up how these satellites send and receive signals and information, what you'll find is the claim is radio waves. But I thought radio waves worked in the air. I thought radio waves needed air to travel through. But if there's no air in space, how are they sending and receiving radio signals? It just makes no sense. But they know that people believe, so they're going to start fabricating and telling these stories. Now, speaking of stories, there was one story about a new continent that was found. And many of us flat earthers have covered that story. Excuse me. And now that we've covered that story and exposed the hoax for what it is, now all of a sudden there are underwater surveys of mountains and mountain ranges and hills and what could possibly have been a continent in the past. They're now showing it and exposing it to the people. And this is good stuff. I think this is good stuff. And this is coming from the Australian government, by the way. I think they knew about these land masses underneath the water this whole time. They just never said anything. And I think that now that people are starting to question their science and question them, they kind of got to throw us a bone, right? Because whoever's in charge of Australia in the past didn't want us to know about this. Now, all of a sudden, they're letting it be known. And I find that to be a bit suspicious, if you ask me. But from all accounts, this imaging is real. GNS Science says we are thrilled to announce that Maui/Zealand has just become the first continent to be completely mapped to its underwater edges. Zealandia just became the first continent to be completely mapped. And by continent, they mean underwater continent. And it's funny that this continent is underwater because when you look at it, that's what New Zealand looks like today. In 1642, Abel Janszoon Tasman discovered New Zealand. He is officially recognized as the first European to discover, quote unquote, New Zealand. His men were the first Europeans to have a confirmed encounter with Maori. Map of New Zealand. Oh, this is the map of New Zealand right here. And Maori are the people of the tribes. A detailed view of the logbook of navigator Abel Tasman, Dutch East India Company, from 1642 and his journey to explore the unknown continent of Australia. Now, here's the headline about that missing continent. Earth's missing continent discovered 375 years after a sailor first visited it. The continent, which had been hidden in plain sight all the time, conceals mysteries that interest geologists and scientists. Although the researchers tracked down this new continent only in 2017, so again, they knew about this since 2017. Here we are 7 years later, and now they're telling us. The hunt had already begun almost 400 years ago. In 1642, a Dutch captain named Abel Tasman, in service of the East India Company, was ordered to explore a southern continent. On August 14, 1642, Tasman departed from Batavia with with 2 ships sailing west to Remedies in the Indian Ocean, as per report by Princeton University Library. On his voyage to the continent, he encountered the local Maori Indians. However, his meeting turned out to be tense. As per BBC, one day many of these people paddled out on a canoe and rammed a small boat that was passing messages between the Dutch ships. 4 Europeans died. This was the end of Tasman's mission. Now, I find this to be a little fishy, because if the natives really did that, then that means Tasman was there to conquer those people, not collaborate with them, and they felt like they had to fight back. Or it could have been an accident that's being played up and blown out of proportion. Either way, if the BBC is the source of this story, then you got to take this story with a grain of salt. Tasman named the location Moordeniers, Murderers Bay, and sailed home, never to return to his land, although he did believe that he had discovered a great new continent. You see that? Moordeniers? M-O-O-R? I think the Moors might be on to something. It was nearly 375 years after Tasman's voyage that geologists stumbled upon this mainland. They announced the discovery by naming it Zealandia, based on the suggestion of American geophysicist Bruce Luyendyk, who described this region in 1995. Zealandia is translated to Terua Maui in the Maori language. In a paper, researchers from GNS Science of New Zealand documented that they had to dredge rock samples from the Fairway Ridge to the Coral Sea to analyze the rock geochemically and understand the underwater makeup of Zealandia, led by Nick Mortimer. They scanned the northern 2/3 of the submerged area, where they unearthed pebbly and cobbly sandstone, fine-grained sandstone, mudstone, bioclastic limestone, and basaltic lava from a variety of periods, as concluded by the radiocarbon dating. The rocks and stones were found to be roughly 95 million years old. Now remember, carbon dating is flawed. So they don't know how old these rocks are. This is again an assumption in which you would be forced to have to believe. Uh, 95 million years old from the late Cretaceous period. The granite and volcanic pebbles were estimated to be 130 million years old. The early Cretaceous period. The basalts, however, were newer, probably about 40 million years old, and from the Eocene period. It's kind of cool, said Mortimer, per BBC. Andy Tulloch, a geologist at the New Zealand Crown Research Institute, GNS Science, who was part of the research team, added, "This is an example of how something very obvious can take a while to uncover." But remember, they literally just said it was uncovered in 1995. Although Zealandia is a vast continent that spans an expanse stretched for 4.9 million square kilometers, around 6 times the size of Madagascar, most of it is submerged under the South Pacific Ocean. Only the areas at Ball's Pyramid on Lord Howe Island raises above the water's veil. It is the smallest, tiniest, and youngest of all known continents. They say it's the youngest, but perhaps could it be the oldest continent? And I'll break that theory down to you in a second. Usually, the continental crust is about 40 kilometers deep, thicker than the oceanic crust, which is about 10 kilometers. The researchers proposed that since Zealandia ended up stretched too much, its crust became thinner around 20 kilometers and finally disappeared under the sea, with 95% of its territory submerged beneath the ocean's depths. Zealandia prowls on planet Earth as a lair possessing an enigmatic charm of mysterious historical elements and ancient stories. So again, they make the claim here that it's the smallest, thinnest, and youngest of all the known continents. But I want you to look at this. This is a picture of Mercator's map of the North Pole with the 4 islands at the North Pole, right? Pay attention to this island here, the yellow island here in the bottom right. Pay attention. I think this is this is Pygmy Island. Pay attention to this island. Boom. Underwater. Half of it is underwater. This image is Mercator's map of the North Pole from 1595. And remember, they had blimps and hot air balloons back then, so flight was possible. And then he took another flight over the North Pole in 1606, which was 11 years later. So 11 years after he drew this map, he went back and there was the Pygmy Island halfway submerged. Which I would believe caused the pygmy to flee this island. Now look at this. Rethinking Earth's timeline. New research reveals that fresh water emerged 500 million years sooner than previously thought. See, when it comes to this mainstream science, they're always rethinking this and rethinking that, which is cool. It's always good to question things, but they always keep moving the goalposts and changing the story. And the reason why they keep changing the story is because instead of us arguing over whether their numbers are legitimate or not, we'll be arguing over whether the Earth was 500 million years old or 1 billion years old or this many years old. You know what I'm saying? So we'll be arguing over their false numbers rather than arguing that their numbers are false. This is why they're constantly changing the numbers, moving the goalposts, changing their stories, shifting their angles, and they're doing it all under the guise of developing science. Like they're constantly investigating and making new discoveries and, you know, publishing new developments and blah, 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 blah. When in fact, all they're doing is creating confusion. So we're going to argue over the lies that they're telling. So one person to say they're lying that it's 500 million years. They're lying that it's 1 billion years. They're lying that and never once will anybody stop to say they're lying about it all. Maybe the Earth was always here and there's no way to put an age on it. You ever thought of that? So whichever side you choose to argue, there's always a third dimension, which is they're both wrong. And when I saw this image, let me go back to it. When I saw this image of the continent underwater and with it partially exposed, giving us the island of New Zealand and some of the other islands around the South Pacific area, it immediately made me think of Mercator's map and the submerging of Pygmy Island. So somehow the water level in this particular region had increased. But that would have meant, because if you look at this map, this is Gleason's map, new standard map of the world that was published in, there it is, Gleason's new standard map of the world. And I believe it was published in the 1800s. I can't see the year on it. And I should have looked it up because it would have made me a little more sharper. There it is. November 16th, 1892. So this map is from 1892. And if you look here, you can see where the North Pole is at, which is where the 4 islands from Mercator's map would have been located. Hang on a second. You can see that the water surrounding this area is connected to all of the oceans. Take a good look. There's no barrier here. So when this island flooded and became this island, that would have had to have been caused by an increase or a rise in the actual sea level. And now today we have a North Pole that's completely frozen over. And the South Pole, or a South Ring, an outer ring, the Antarctic ring, that's also completely frozen over. So if it's frozen over today, but it wasn't frozen over in the 1600s, what happened between then and now that could have possibly caused the water levels to rise and even possibly completely submerge this continent? And who knows how many other continents and land masses right here in our circle are submerged because of this increase in the water. And if you look at the flat Earth map, you can see, let me go to this one. You can see that the ice wall is all encompassing, which is holding all the water in. But when you look at this flat Earth map that's hanging on the wall in the UN building, of course, you see a break in the ice, which means there's no barrier here, which means this water level would have had to have risen too. Now, what could possibly cause such a dramatic increase in sea level and also cause the freezing over of the ice ring? Let me show you something. Here's some older maps of the world. I'm not sure whose map this is and what the time period is on it, but it doesn't show anything frozen in Antarctica. And also it shows the 4 islands at the North Pole. Here's another one. Different map maker. Unfrozen Antarctica. No barrier here. And right here in the center, you have your 4 islands at the North Pole. Now, what could have caused, and I say these maps are older because if you look here, there's more land here. But when you go back to Mercator's map, there's less land. On that map, it shows all this land here and more land where these little orange islands are. Let me go back to it. It shows more land. So what I think happened to cause the Earth to freeze over in these extremities in the dead center and in the circumference, considering the sun rotates primarily around the equator, it spirals into the north in the summer months, and then it spirals out to the south in the winter months. Here in the northern half, in the northern inner part of the circle, this would be your northern hemisphere that this red equator line is separating, right? And I believe that the Earth was much warmer because the sun was a bit higher in the sky and its light and heat and warmth spread farther. And if you think back to the giant trees concept, then it all starts to make sense, because even today you can see that trees have some sort of interaction with the sun. Hell, without the sun, they won't even grow. And if you look back at the ancient mountain, the mountain ranges and the plateaus being ancient tree stumps, those were some pretty big ass trees, which would have stretched very high into the sky. which means that the whatever interaction that the sun and those trees have would have still had to have been a healthy interaction, because as big as those trees were, they would have reached very high into the sky, which means the sun would have had to been at a higher elevation. And with the sun being at a higher elevation, that would give you warmer temperatures in these now cold regions. Because if you take a flashlight and hold it over 6 inches over the top of your desk with the light facing down, shining on the desk, if you raise it up another 6 inches, that area of light will essentially have doubled. So the higher up the sun would have meant the farther its rays would have reached. And this is probably why we find tropical plants like palms, the gold miners at least, find these tropical plants, these palms buried in the permafrost up in Alaska and in these northern regions, because it was warmer back then. But nowadays, this is what they give us: Earth as you've never seen it before. And this is supposed to be a satellite cartoon image of the globe Earth looking down at the North Pole from above and looking up at the South Pole from below. And this is what they tell us the globe Earth looks like now in 2024. But just a few years ago, they were publishing all these pictures of the globe with all these different variations, and the continents are different sizes and all that. Look at 1997 and 2002. Look at North America. North America is much bigger. It's the same circumference circle that it's in that's being portrayed as the globe, but the continents are bigger. In North America is bigger in 2002, and in 1997 North America is smaller. Clearly, these images are fake. And what sucks is other space agencies around the world have been producing the exact same garbage. And that's because those space agencies are all being ran by the same secret societies. And those secret societies are tied to the royal families, which brings me to this Q post where it says, from pharaohs to kings to elected officials. But from the top, it says, your voice matters, your vote matters. Everything you see today is an attempt to eliminate that. And those same ancient people that we revere for their intelligence and their flat earth cosmology, when they would take tribal meetings and organize themselves, they would each have a voice and they would take votes. Voting has been a part of the human condition for a long time. That's how order is established. And this is why everything you see today is an attempt to eliminate your voice and your vote. Because your voice is basically going to influence the votes. And if your voice is having too much of an influence to the voters, then they have to take away your vote and take away your voice. A moment in time, history has taught us that people will rise. Judgment Revolution Day against the rulers, from pharaohs to kings to elected officials, a rigged system of control and corruption on the backs of the people, modern day slavery. People will rise again. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And everything that Q named here, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, the ones who implemented the globe earth and are forcing the globe earth upon us. The authorities. This includes your scientists who publish those bullshit articles that make all these assumptions and claims with no evidence, but people still believe them. They're the authorities. We're wrestling every Flat Earth Wednesday. We're wrestling against the science authorities, against the powers of this dark world, the money behind those authorities, right? And against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And those spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms are the basically the rulers of this world and their ancestors who have ingrained an ideology into their progeny that being the rulers, being the authorities is what you're destined to be, and everybody else is destined to be a sheep. And these spiritual forces are what's driving a lot of the spells that these elites are casting on the minds of the people, including the globe earth. From pharaohs to kings to elected officials, the globe earth started with not the pharaohs, because the ancient Egyptians were flat earthers, but it started with Ptolemy when he started mixing and mingling with the Egyptians. From pharaohs to kings to elected officials, the kings pushed the globe earth. Now today, the elected officials push the globe earth. In fact, they vote on bills and resolutions to spend billions and billions of dollars with NASA to do more of their bogus hoaxes that they've been doing. Elected officials. Now, speaking of the ancient Egyptians, the symbolism is very, very key to understanding what the ancients were trying to tell us. And by ancients, I even mean ancient Americans that existed in centuries prior to us, like during 1776. And during 1776, I personally believe that those founders were flat earthers because, of course, they were Freemasons, and the Freemasonic cosmology is flat earth. But they also used this symbol as their inspiration for the American flag. They took the pharaoh's throne and they flipped it upside down, and there's the American flag. So it represents overthrowing the rulers. You know, wrestling against the rulers, the authorities, and against the powers of darkness, the powers of this dark world, and against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And America was not supposed to be bought into this Hellenistic, Greco-Roman, ancient Egyptian pharaonic system that we're under now. Because the founders of this country clearly illustrated that they did not believe in the royalty. The pharaoh represents the royalty, whether it be a king or an elected official. The pharaoh is the symbol for that elite class. And when you flip the pharaoh's throne over, you have the American flag, because the American flag was created out of or during a rebellion against the monarch. That's why they call it the flag of freedom. And of course, these goons that are being controlled by the mainstream media and the puppet politicians during the Black Lives Matter riots, they flew the American flag upside down, which is shitting on the legacy of the founders of this country, which wrote a constitution that protects your free speech and allows you to do stupid shit like this. But when they were doing this, they were symbolizing that they still serve the pharaoh. They still serve the royalty. That's what the American flag upside down. That's why they say it means distress, because if you're enslaved by a ruling class, you're in distress. See that? You flip the throne upside down, you get the king being dethroned. And that's why I say not everybody in American politics is down with the pharaonic worship and down with the pharaonic stuff, because we got governors calling Donald Trump a flat earther. I covered articles with them calling him a science denier. There's plenty of other members of Congress that support his cause and are also flat earthers, but they can't come out and say it because they'll never get reelected. And that's the sad part. That's the sad part. But not everybody in American politics is down with the pharaonic rulership. And Donald Trump is the biggest adversary that they have because he's a populist. He's very popular among the people, always has been. Now, Freemasons built the White House, they say, and the Capitol building. And never mind this man calling himself Lady Gaga here. I want you to pay attention to the ceiling. You notice how the ceiling is dome shaped and has these little holes for resonant frequencies. Those are resonators. And look at the artwork at the top in the dead center of that dome. That's supposed to be, I think, the war in heaven where the angels were in heaven having a discussion. But when you look at this, you realize that whoever built this place understood ancient cosmology and encoded it into their architecture by building the dome, which represents the firmament, and also going ahead and painting the ceiling, which represents basically the stairway to heaven. And that kind of reminds me of the Hebrew cosmos. You see, because when you look at this dome would represent this firmament right here that's over the earth. The hole at the center of the dome represents the stairway to heaven, the ladder to heaven. And when you look at the ancient Hebrew cosmology, there you have the hole right there at the top. And who's at the top? God, heaven, in the heaven of heavens. The heaven of heavens. And that was the inspiration for this painting. This was flat earth encoding right here. And the idea of the dome and the center and all that all comes from ancient cosmology. This is the cosmological depictions of those primitive people that Google likes to tell you about. All flat earth cosmology, well, except for NASA. All similar flat earth cosmology. Because they did not have a ruling science class over them, telling them what to believe and what not to believe. And they were figuring a lot of this shit out on their own. And these were the depictions that they came up with. And they all seem very similar, with very similar characteristics. And then when you challenge the globe earthers on everything else, or when they challenge you on everything else and you beat their challenge, then they say, well, if Earth is flat, where's the edge? Just pull up a picture of the Antarctic coastline and there's your edge. And they kind of rub it in our face because they have the Antarctic Treaty, so we can't go to Antarctica. But every once in a while, they snap some photographs and put them out. Sorry, I was reading some comments. But this is the ancient cosmology that they skip over when they teach you about the globe. When they say, oh, the ancient people were primitive and believed the earth was flat. This was their belief and their conception of the earth. Even the ancient Hebrews, flat plane, water is level. And what's funny is the Hebrews actually have a spherical model, but the earth is just flat and inside of the sphere, which is interesting. See that? The stairway to heaven, the opening in the center, top center of the firmament, stairway to heaven, opening in the top center of the firmament. And the dome, of course, represents the firmament. Damn, it's only been an hour and 36 minutes. What the hell? I am freaking falling asleep. And for you beginners out here, let me just throw this in here for you. Go ahead and take a screenshot of this slide. For you beginners out here that are getting into flat earth debates and these globe earthers saying, when ships go over the horizon, they're going over the curb. Share this with them. This guy deliberately filmed this on a football field because football fields are leveled, a level plane. And he still disappeared from the bottom up. That's what happens to the ships. So keep that in your arsenal because this defeats the ships going over the horizon. Ships disappearing at the horizon are going over the curve. This defeats that hands down, no questions asked. It's an actual experiment that proves the point. Now, I mentioned the Antarctic Treaty earlier because beyond this little world that we're trapped in right here, there's said to be more continents outside of it. Oh, you know what? Let me reverse course a little bit, because I was going to tell you guys. I told you guys about the tall trees and the sun being higher in the sky. That's how all this was green and lush and not frozen over. But as the big trees were cut down and cut down and cut down, the sun began to drop in elevation, which then concentrated its light in a smaller area and made the nights longer, I would presume. And as that happened, when trees are cut down, they release moisture, water vapor. And that water vapor makes its way into the atmosphere and then condenses and falls back to the earth as rain. And it could be because all those large trees were taken out, it caused more precipitation and actually filled up our flat earth water basin a little more. That could be that's a theory. And that would explain why in 1595, Mercator had the entire Pygmy Island, and then 11 years later, Pygmy Island is submerged underwater. Could all this extra water have come from the trees that they cut down? Quite possibly. Because the big question is, where would all this extra water have come from? Had come from? And guys, hit the Cash App, hit the PayPal, hit the Venmo. Support the show. Support the show. Now this is one. Now this here that they have hanging at the UN building is one conception of the flat Earth, where we have our 7 continents inside the ice wall. Each dot represents a member nation of the Antarctic Treaty. And then there's 4 continents outside the ice wall. Then there's another ice wall, which is basically the border, but this might be another broken concentric ring pattern like this. And I believe that the Antarctic Treaty is to keep us from exploring these outer lands and observing their sun and moon and stars in their part of the world, and seeing new constellations, having longer days, longer nights, whatever the fuck it may be. But this is usually an interesting conversation that most flat earthers like to get into. Does the Earth stop at Antarctica, or are there more continents outside the ice wall, hence the Antarctic Treaty? I would say the latter. And just like the UN got this blatantly displayed in their building in New York, they also have it on their flag. I do believe in the giant trees theory. Some flat earthers don't, but I do, because that is a logical explanation for why these now frozen wastelands that we experience today, that we know of today, didn't exist back so long ago. All right, guys, I think I got to get up out of here. I'm getting tired. The sleep's hitting me. The sleep is hitting me. But basically, beyond the curve is, I believe there's more lands that are buried underwater, that are submerged underwater, and this all happened as a result of cutting down those big trees. There would have been a massive release of water vapor into the atmosphere, and more rain. And even still, even if you believe in the concentric ring model, where all this water is connected because there's no barrier separating anything or fully separating anything, who's to say they weren't cutting big trees down in this part of the world, which caused more water to fill up? So you'd have us. Let me go to this one, is better. So you'd have had us in here cutting down all the giant trees, filling up our basin with water, the water spilling over into their territory. They get wind of what we're doing. They start cutting down their trees, and then that water starts to fill up, and then you have entire continents submerged underwater. But I think it all starts from the giant trees. You see, a lot of these mysteries you can't solve without incorporating the giant trees. You can even go ask a flat earth expert right now, why do you think these lands were unfrozen that are now frozen? And they won't tell you they believe because the trees were bigger and the sun was higher in the sky. They'll say, we don't know. Hold on, I got to switch phones. The chargers, got to get it on the charger. All right. So it's very interesting to think about. And I think the most interesting idea when it comes to flat earth are the continents beyond the ice wall. Because for me personally, that was my biggest point of interest. What is out there? Who is out there? And why can't we go see them? Who's to say one day you might make it across the ice wall and get to one of these islands or one of those continents and come to find out they're all clones of us or some shit. Q-Tracks, my email is in the description box. It's citizenman87@gmail.com. But anyway, guys, I think I'm going to have to call it a night because I am so tired. My goodness, I haven't been this tired in a long time. But this Q post is more political. It refers to the politics. But when you're talking flat earth, the pharaohs, the kings, and the elected officials were involved in, the pharaohs were involved in turning the flat earth into a ball. The kings and the elected officials are responsible for reinforcing and spreading the idea of the ball. The ball earth started with the Greeks. Entire peoples and their lands were conquered just to make them believe in the globe. But anyway, I could barely keep my freaking eyes open. Anyway, guys, I hope you all enjoyed the show. I know it was a bit of a drag tonight because we only made it through an hour and 45 minutes and I'm already crashing out. So I will see you guys on the next show. God, I'm so fucking tired. It's ridiculous. Like, it just hit me out of nowhere. Like, I was fine the whole time, and then all of a sudden, you know how that sleep just comes through and just knock you in the back of your head, make you want to fall out? It does, man. It happened to me, and I hate it. I hate when that happens because in the beginning I think I'm good. I can make this shit happen. I can push this shit through. You know what I'm saying? And then that sleep starts to kick in. It's like, oh, okay, time to listen to my body because I'm an old man, and well, I have to listen to my body. But before we go, make sure you subscribe to the Citizen Man Backup channel. Follow your boy over on Rumble to create an account. It's fast and it's free. Get yourself a copy of the Lost Book of Herbal Remedies, Metabolic Cooking, Anabolic Cooking, all linked in the description box below. And hold on. And last but not least, shout out to everybody that donated, supported the show. Shout out to everybody who's probably going to donate on the replay, hopefully. And anybody who might donate right after the show because you're watching it on delay. If you guys would like to send in a kind donation to support the broadcast, you can do so via Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo using the tag scrolling across the screen in the banner below. The links that are pinned to the top of the YouTube chat in the black box where it says Citizen Man TV in yellow, or the links that are also pinned in the description box of every video. Shout out to Brother Lee 14224. He says, have a great Flat Earth Wednesday show. Shout out to LTO, says, Viva la Tierra Plana. And shout out to my brother Frank and my brother Leonard over on PayPal for your support. Appreciate that, you guys. I appreciate that. We didn't make it to the halfway mark, but that's all right. All must give. All must give. So if you got something to give, please feel free to do so. If you're catching this on the replay, don't let this message get by you. We need that support. We need that support. We need that support. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for being here. I wish I was trying to hang on to the 2-hour mark, but now I'm just going to make the show drag. But Friday, I've been brainstorming some stuff for Friday, so I'm going to have some shit for you on Friday. But for right now, I got to shut it down because I don't think I got much left in me, yo. So with that being said, thank you guys for your support. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you hitting that like button, hitting that thumbs up. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Citizen Man, out.